Hey IB environmental students, we're back and we're going to look at topic 2, ecosystems, and review how that might relate to our other topic, systems. So what is a system then? Well, a system we learned was an assemblage of parts and their relationship forming a functioning entirety or whole. So here we have this system of a lake, and the lake itself has a storage of what? Okay, water, right? And it has flows or inputs, things like precipitation, evaporation is an output. We can think about are these transfers and transformations, all that good stuff from our last unit. So even when we think about ecosystems, it's going to be very related to systems in general. But here's some definitions. Topic 2.11 is defining ecology, which is the study of interrelationships between living organisms, their biotic, which we know is living, and their abiotic, non-living environment. Remember that prefix abiotic means non-living. So here we have the abiotic rock and the biotic cat. Okay, so ecology is how those two things are interrelated. We're going to move forward to our next objective, 2.12, which is trophic levels. And we can see that trophic levels here is the eating level in a food web or food chain. This guy here is a food chain, and this grasshopper is the first trophic level, and it's being eaten by a frog, a second trophic level. And we're going to talk about how each of these different trophic levels has different terms for them. So here are those different terms for those trophic levels. The first level, which is not even pictured here, is a producer, which could have been some sort of grass that the grasshopper ate. And then the primary consumer is the grasshopper. Then the frog eats that secondary consumer, snake, tertiary consumer, and hawk, quaternary consumer, and so forth. Okay, and if we were to compare food chains and food webs, how would they be different? Well, a food chain is the pathway in which food transfers between trophic levels. So when the grasshopper is eaten by the frog, the food or matter within the grasshopper gets transferred into the frog. That's all it's saying. And there's just one simple pathway. Compared to a food web, which is more complex and interconnected. So look at how complex this diagram here. This is amazing. This one's computer generated. It's a model, so it's just representative. It's not necessarily everything, but so are all of these things. They're just models. But if we were to pick, is a food chain or a food web more realistic model of an ecosystem, we'd have to pick a food web because it's more complex. So comparing these two things is our topic objective 2.1.3, where you're going to compare webs and chains. Next, what are each of these different things we mentioned briefly before? Each of these different trophic levels are eating relationships. Well, we know that producers are things that do photosynthesis, like this plant here, but we also are going to call them autotrophs, meaning that they can make their own food. Auto means on their own, troph meaning eating level. Compared to us, we are heterotrophs. We consume our food. We have to eat something different than us. That's that prefix hetero. And we've learned looking at that food chain that there's different eating levels that are consumers. So just remember, there's a lot of similar words meaning the same thing in this topic. Other different players in our ecosystem, decomposers are going to be heterotrophs, meaning they eat other things. They can't make their own food. They break down dead or inorganic matter, and there's a lot of different kinds of them. For instance, fungi, bacteria in the soil that we can't really see, they're all breaking down different matter and releasing the chemicals to be taken in by other organisms. So these guys are really important for cycling nutrients. Detrivores are very similar to decomposers and pretty much are going to be interrelated. They're going to be more of these kind of worms and other critters that are bottom feeders that usually eat dead remains or even poo or just leaf litter. But both things, decomposers and detrivores, release nutrients to continue the cycle of things like nitrogen, carbon, and so forth. Now we're going to shift topics. We're going to talk a little bit about where organisms live and that sort of thing. And we're going to talk about living is going to be referred to as a habitat. So this camel has a habitat of the desert. Now, this term habitat is usually confused with this term niche or niche. Niche is not where the organisms live, it's the responsibilities of that organism and its interactions with the environment, the abiotic factors. So this organism, the beaver, its job in the environment is to be a builder, and it's going to really make a big difference in lakes and streams because it will hold back water. So it really impacts the waterways. So the role of the beaver is to be a builder and make streams kind of stopped up. Okay, now thinking about systems, we can look at different scales of a system and this hierarchy of complexity of our ecosystem. The first level we're going to look at is an organism. An organism is just any living thing. There's certain characteristics of living things, but we're not going to talk about that too much. A species then is a group of organisms that are similar, but they are in the same place. They're able to interbreed. So, for instance, if this guy couldn't breed with someone similar next to it, in reality, they're not really considered a species. They have to be able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring to be considered a species. The next level we're going to discuss is a population, which is a group of organisms of the same species who live in the same habitat at the same time, compared to a community, which is an association of organisms of different species that are living together with some degree of interdependence. So here's our examples. We're still in the grasslands as we were with the gazelle on the previous slide, but now we have multiple gazelle. There's a population, and these guys are almost like a herd, and they'll interact with the environment together. But it's all one species. That's a population. A community then has these gazelle, and they are ibex. Who knows what those guys are in the background, but they're also with zebras, a separate population. So a community is multiple populations together. Next, we have our ecosystem. Now we're adding even more populations, but we're going to add in the abiotic. So here we can see rocks, we can see the soil, we can see the water. All these things are physical to the environment, and they're interacting with the biotic. And an ecosystem is the first level of complexity when we're referring to not just the living things, but also the abiotic. Next, we have biomes. Biomes are each kind of different, they're going to be different characteristics, such as they all are going to have the same rain or temperature or sunlight. So all deserts have very similar characteristics. Very little rain, very drastic temperatures, a lot of sunlight. The rainforest has a lot of sunlight, a lot of rain, but they're all relatively the same. So biomes are similar characteristics to the same area. Now our biosphere is our biggest level of complexity. We've been talking about this a lot. At this scale, because there was a Biosphere 2 project, right? So that's the highest level of organization we think about on the planet, and of course it as well has biotic and abiotic parts to it. Alright, and then that's it for today. Next class we're going to keep going on pyramids, and so if this part is not filled in your notes tonight, that's okay. You might want to jot down maybe the 10% rule, but we'll get back to pyramids next class. Good job, guys. Good luck studying for your systems quest.